Hey guys, it's Kevin again, and as you know, a couple weeks ago, the Sundance Film Festival did conclude, and I thankfully was able to watch a good majority of Sundance movies this time around, especially considering that last year I wasn't able to watch any. I was at a friend's wedding, hang out with friends, and I just wasn't able to really focus on it. It wasn't at a good time. Like, I just wasn't able to find the time to watch any of them, so I didn't end up paying for any because I knew I probably wouldn't end up getting to watch them. So, unfortunately, I didn't get to do it last year, but I really wanted to make up for it this year and try to prioritize it, and thankfully, I was able to watch the most amount of Sundance films that I have seen, with that being 9. Very excited to get into this video. Sundance this year, I think, was generally really great. The majority of the films I'm talking about are definitely ones that I do recommend you guys seeking out whenever they do come out. I will put a quick disclaimer, though, that I don't know when all these movies are going to come out. Some of them don't even have distributors yet. So I am going to try to be a little bit more brief in some of these reviews than usual, just because, I want you guys to see these movies for yourselves. I want you guys to, go into them knowing as little as possible. That's one of the best things, I think, about Sundance, is that you really are just clicking on, which films you want to watch based upon the actors or based upon the premises. So you really just kind of have to pick and choose what you would like to watch, and it has to be solely based around, things like a cast or just the premise of the film, and not so much around any marketing or anything like that. So it's a very unique experience, and it's one that I always do enjoy doing. But with that said, some of these movies I'm talking about, I think, are best to go into knowing as little as possible. So I will try to steer around certain things as much as I possibly can. So, very excited to get into all of that. But with that said, we're just going to go ahead and get into the first movie. Okay, so the first movie we're going to be talking about is a film called Rob Peace. Again, similar to most of these, I didn't know anything going into it other than it was directed by Chiwetel Ejiofor, and it kind of told this story about this guy who's this, very famous, well, not very famous, but very intelligent scientist of sorts, but he also had a lot of other stuff going on within his life, and I really did end up enjoying this one quite a bit. It definitely was not exactly the movie that I was expecting it to be, but I thought it was still really great to watch. Right off the bat, I think the performances here are just fantastic. Jay Will is an amazing find in this movie. I've never really seen him in anything before, but I really do think after this movie, we're going to be seeing a lot more of him because he just shows such incredible range in this film. Rob Peace is not at all an easy role to portray. There's a lot of different emotions that this guy ends up going through. There's a lot of different scenarios he ends up going through. His life is a very tumultuous one, and it definitely is one that is hard to portray, but Will just does such a great job at conveying the most authentic emotions possible. You feel every single second of what this character is going through. When he's at his highest, you feel, you're really excited for him. When he's at his lowest, you're really devastated for him, and I think he just does such a great job of embodying who Rob Peace is and things like that. I just really liked everything he did with him. I thought he was just had such genuine screen presence and such charisma to him, and that really did help elevate this film. I thought, he was just really great here. The more the film goes on, the more impressive his performance really does become, and I just really liked what he ended up doing in this movie. It's just such a dynamic performance, and really just one of the kinds where it's like, I want to see what this guy does next immediately. I think he is just extraordinary here. But Chiwetel Ejiofor also is so good in this film. He's playing he's playing a character that I think could have come across as very one-note and very generic, but Ejiofor really just adds so many layers to him, and he makes him so much more complex of a character, and ends up being a very emotional performance, playing this father to Rob, who isn't quite as involved in his life as he maybe wants to be of Skeet, but is a very important figure within his life, and especially towards the end, this film has some truly emotional moments that I think everyone who watches this film will absolutely be talking about. He is just fantastic in this movie. Mary J. Blige also, I thought, was very good here. You know, she plays Rob Peace's mother, and she always kind of wants the best for her son. She always sees him as sort of like he's gonna be the rare exception within their family. Their family's always gone down this line of either being criminals or lowlifes or people who just aren't really taken seriously, but he's going to be the one to turn it all around, and you can see how much potential she has instilled upon him, but you also see the sort of, you also see the sort of guilt that she feels throughout the movie for, why he's in the place that he is, but also the hope that she has throughout the film. I mean, she is just fantastic here. I really enjoyed her performance in this film. I think the chemistry between the two characters, they work really well together. They share a lot of screen time together, and she just does such a great job here. I think the rest of the cast is very good. Obviously, we do have to talk about Camila Cabello, who is in this movie, and I've been kind of harsh on her as an actress before. I think she has been improving. Saw her in, Trolls Band Together. I didn't think she was bad in that. Here, she's clearly the weakest actor in the movie. She is not on the level of some of the other actors here. But I do think, especially as the film goes on, she does hold her own. This is not at all a terrible performance by any means. I think she does do at least an all right job here. I don't necessarily think the chemistry was there between her and Jay Will. I don't really think that was there, but I do think she had some moments that definitely did stick out to me. So I don't think she overall was that bad in this film. But yeah, I think overall the acting is pretty good here. Let's talk about the directing in this movie. I think Chiwetel Ejiofor, I know he's only directed, I think, one film prior to this, and I never got a chance to watch that movie, but I really did enjoy the way he directed this film. I think he does a really good job of just showcasing all the different aspects of Rob Peace's life. There's so many different things that he's doing. One second, he is trying to be this student at Yale who has a molecular biophysics degree and things like that. He's trying to achieve that. The next second, he's trying to clear his father's name. His father has been involved in this case of sorts, and he is trying to clear his name because he thinks he was clearly innocent, and he's trying to prove how he can be innocent. The next second, he is involved in some very dangerous activities in an effort to help his family and, provide for his family and get the funds that he needs and things like that. So there's so many different things that he's doing. And I think Ejiofor just does a really great job of depicting all of that, but also showing the potential and just the, success that Peace had. He was someone that was always achieving for greatness. He always wanted to turn things around. He always wanted to move forward. He always tried to look for the best in everybody, and I think that's something that he just does a really good job with. You can tell that Ejiofor felt a lot of passion within this story, and I think that's something he just does a really good job with. For a film like this to work, you need a director that really cares about the story that he's covering, and I think Ejiofor absolutely did. Rob Peace is someone that, a lot of people I don't think know about, but once you hear about his story, you're never going to forget about him. You're never going to forget about the things that he achieved. You're never going to forget about the life that he lived. And I think Ejiofor's directing is a big reason for that. I think he does do a really good job when it comes to the directing in this movie. When it comes to the screenplay here, his writing, I do think needs a bit of work. I think as a director, he is very good. I think his writing, he isn't quite as strong with. There are things that do work really well here. I think the themes that he is trying to go for within this film about success, especially, depicting all the things that Rob was able to achieve within his life, he does do a good job with, but also depicting the life that he led. Like I said, he lives in this very crime-ridden town. Almost everybody there is either a drug dealer or a prisoner or involved in some sort of gang activity. I mean, it is a very harsh and dangerous environment that Peace comes from, and he's really the person trying to turn it all around. He's the person that everyone sees as like, he's going to be the rare example. He has genuine potential. And I think the film really portrays that very well. Everyone kind of sees him as someone who is destined for greatness and is someone that is going to be able to, turn the legacy of the town around. He's not going to end up, like everyone else. And I think that alone is compelling to watch, because you're hoping that he's able to achieve this success, but you also see the various things he gets himself involved in, and you're really not sure where it's actually going to go. And I think that's something the movie does do a really good job with. For me, the film really was at its best when it was focusing on the family, when it's focusing on him and his mother, and especially him with his father, and this case that his dad gets involved in that Peace is adamant that his dad is innocent in, and he's trying to do everything he possibly can to prove his innocence and, things like that. I think that for me is when the film was at its most interesting. I really found myself involved in that part of the movie, what the film has to say about like race and corruption and things like that. I think is really well done, and that's something that I really did enjoy. It's definitely, there's some very there's definitely some very like hard-hitting moments in that section of the film, but I really do think that is when the film is at its best. Where it struggles a bit is when it tries to cover some other aspects of Rob Peace's life. When he's involved in college classes and things like that, I think the movie kind of rushes through some aspects of his life. It doesn't really feel like we get to we get to really live in with him in these scenarios and get to see how he becomes what he does, especially within that part of the film. He starts off as someone that everyone's just kind of unsure about. People don't really know what he's really all about, and then suddenly people are warming up to what he's doing, and it just didn't feel as natural of a shift. There is a lot of time jumping within this movie, and it just feels like sometimes the film has a little bit too much on its mind, and it can feel like it's biting off a bit more than it can chew. And it's one of those instances where perhaps this movie would have potentially worked better if it was just a like limited series on like HBO or Apple TV Plus or something like that. Like, it definitely does have that feel throughout where it can feel a bit truncated, but especially when it comes to what Rob Peace ends up doing to protect to try to, gain funds to turn his town around and things like that. That whole portion of the movie, I never really felt like we got to dive as deep into. It always felt like a side thing, and I don't know if that was what Ejiofor intended, but I feel like considering how substantial that part of Rob Peace's life is, I feel like we should have paid a lot more attention to it, and it always just felt like, oh yeah, this is just something else that he's doing, and it never felt like the proper attention was put to that part of the movie. So I think that really did end up bringing it down for me, and I think that's why I can't say this film is quite as great as it wants to be. There's also quite a few characters here that I just felt we didn't dive as deep into as we need to. Like, there's a revelation that happens with Mary J. Blige's character in the third act of the movie, and it's a pretty important scene, but we really don't ever come back to it. We don't really get to see any sort of payoff there. It was something that I thought was very effective when it happened, but I didn't really feel like it got the proper attention that it needed. Some of his friends as well that he comes across here, aside from one of them, I don't really feel like any of them were all that well developed, and we're clearly supposed to care about them, but I never really did, just because I didn't really feel like they ever dived that deep into these characters. So I just felt a little bit disconnected. But I do think the film, when it works, it really works well, especially in the film's third act. The directions it ends up going are just truly had me shocked. I did not expect the film to go in the direction that it did, but it also just really summed up the point that the film was trying to make. It's this really strong look at someone who really is this genius of sorts. I mean, the things that he's able to do, whether it's involved in the class or whether it's involved in, again, helping his father within this ongoing case that he's in, and, the constant jail time that he's facing, are really just incredible to watch. He was a true genius in that way, but his story has gone completely unnoticed, and this film really just makes a point at showing why this is such an important story to tell. It also is worth noting, though, like, if you don't know anything about Rob Peace, don't even look it up, because it literally spoils what happens in this movie. So So don't even look up what happened to Rob Peace, because I think the film is best when you go in not even knowing much about him. I certainly didn't know the way this was all going to wrap up, and I think just the way this ends, I mean, this is definitely not a story that should be overlooked in any way. I think this is going to be a very impactful film for many. So yes, it can feel kind of conventional and sloppy at points. The cinematography also definitely gives that vibe, just like a generic biopic. There's nothing really that special about it. I did enjoy the score, especially as we transition throughout different decades and things like that. I do think the film can be a little bit sloppy in terms of its editing. Like I said, it's jumping around a lot, and I think that's something else that they could have done a better job with. His relationship with Camille Bello's character as well never really felt all that well developed here. It feels like they meet and then suddenly they're just falling in love, and it never felt quite as, again, lived in as it needed to be. So while on one hand, I do think there is quite a bit that is rushed in this movie, I think the things that it does well, it really does very well. Like I said, when it dives into the legacy of this character and the potential that he has, and all the different things he's trying to manage, when it dives into his family life, I really do think the movie is at its best. But Jay Will especially, just such an incredible talent. He really does hold it together here. Chiwetel Ejiofor also just gives such a incredible performance in this movie. There really is a lot to like about this one. It's definitely a film that I think is going to shock a lot of people. I think some people might find the movie, like I said, to be a little bit too conventional at points in terms of the way it's structured. But overall, as someone who really didn't know anything about Rob Peace going into this, I came out very just affected by his story, really feeling like this is a film that everyone kind of does need to see, and really feeling like this is one that's going to get a lot of people talking in numerous ways. I don't know what distributor is going to pick this up. I could see this being like Apple TV or something like that. It really does feel like it's like right at home as like a streaming movie. I definitely do feel like it has that feel to it, but it definitely is a film that is one that is not to go unnoticed. It's not quite as good as I want it to be, but I think for what it is still very effective. So I am overall going to give Rob Peace a B. I do think this film, like I said, definitely there's some things that it could have done a little bit better, but for what it is, it's an extremely effective story that really should never be forgotten, and especially, what it's trying to do, I think it does very well. So I definitely do recommend checking out this one. Right, the next movie we're talking about here is the one I was actually most excited for, and like I had a feeling was going to sell out pretty much immediately, and that is Love Me. This, of course, I, again, didn't know anything about it other than this had Kristen Stewart and Stephen Yeun, who are both fantastic in this movie. They both do a really good job at playing these two characters, both of which are very kind of like unsure about themselves and trying to, discover more of who they are and what their purpose is and things like that. And I think that they bring a lot of humanity and pathos to these characters, and I think they do a really good job with that. They really keep this film just so engaging and watchable throughout. Unfortunately, they are really the best thing that this film has going for it, because other than that, I really did not care for this film all that much. I will give props to Sam and Andrew Zakuro. There's clearly a lot on their mind in this movie. There's a lot of ground that they want to cover, and I really do appreciate the ambition that they have here. I mean, they aim very high in this movie. The first, 20 to 30 minutes, there's barely any dialogue here. We're watching these two inanimate objects, just like a satellite and a buoy, meet online and fall in love and make this genuine connection and try to discover who each other is. And I think this is when the movie is honestly at its best. I found this section of the film to be actually very charming and sweet. The character of Me is one I definitely did find myself latching onto. She's someone that's really trying to discover who she really is in an age where all of humanity has pretty much vanished. She now is trying to figure out, what really is my purpose? What am I supposed to do? And I think that's something the movie does do a really good job with, and I really did enjoy that section of the film. But then the movie takes a really strange direction, and I don't really want to get into what it really ends up being, but I think from that point on, the film just really ends up dragging out, and I get what the movie is clearly trying to say. It's trying to say a lot about the idea of identity and self-worth, and kind of just how even when we go, technology is still going to be here and it's always going to be around, and, you know, it can be used in any way we possibly want it to. And I think all of those ideas are fascinating, but the issue really is that aside from some just very on the nose, like, social commentary that it's trying to say, I don't really think this movie has a lot to say. Like, there's really not a lot that this movie has going for it. And I think that really is, like, the biggest issue here. Like, it's so obvious what they are trying to do, and once the film really kind of settles into itself, it never really feels like it's going anywhere. Anytime it does, it just starts to feel repetitive, and it never really tries to go any deeper with its concepts than what I just said. You have the character of Mi. She is obsessed with, like, this YouTube video that she watched. She is constantly wanting to try to be this character of sorts, and just where they end up going, it just really did not end up working for me. I didn't find these characters to be all that likable. I didn't find the directions they took to be all that interesting. It ends in a way that was just very dissatisfying, I thought. I just was really annoyed by where this film ended up going, because I definitely did see potential here, but the more it went on, the more it just really started to lose me. It's like the pure definition of a movie where if this was like a 30-minute short film, I think it actually would have been very effective. I think it actually would have been very sweet, and it would have been one of the highlights of the festival for me. But the more they kept going on with this storyline and seeing Mi and her trying to basically just become, like, mold herself after something she sees on the internet, and her also trying to force the character of I Am to also, like, play along, I just really wasn't into it at all. It really just didn't end up working out for me. There's points where it feels like the movie's finally trying to address what the, you know, what it's trying to do, and it's trying to, like, evolve itself, and then it just did the same thing over and over again. It just, we see Mi trying to do something and I Am isn't liking it, and then Mi tries to get I Am to like it, but I Am doesn't want to play around anymore. Like, it's just the same thing over and over, and it really just started to get tiring, and it really just started to annoy me. I was hoping that the film was going to become something more and really evolve itself, and it just never really did. And again, these aren't ideas that I think are bad. I don't dislike the idea of what this movie is going for. It just never really builds off of that. It always feels like simply just an idea. And I think that's the best way to describe this movie. It's an idea. Like, these two have interesting ideas that they want to explore, but they don't really know how to develop them further, and I think that absolutely is what brings it down. I think the only real impact the movie gave me, like I said, is that I think it would be a really good short film. I really do enjoy the aesthetics that they apply here. There's a lot of risks this movie takes that I think are really cool. The score also is very interesting. The way it's like very minimal and almost like ambient in the way they go about it. I thought that was kind of cool. But overall, I mean, this film just really did not do all that much for me. I was really hoping that I was coming on here to say that, like, this is a really powerful film and that this had a lot of interesting, you know, ideas that hadn't been explored. Like, it takes these ideas and explores them in, like, a really interesting way. But aside from, like, really just kind of marveling at the aesthetics and just the sheer risks that it takes, it really just didn't leave all that much of an impression on me. By the end, I felt very hollow. It ends with this message, but then it kind of, like, contradicts itself at the end. I don't know if other people are going to feel the way, but I certainly felt that way with what the movie was trying to, with what the movie was implying by the end. It really just did not end up working for me at all. Like I said, I do think it does have charm and, you know, interesting ideas within its first 30 minutes, but the more it goes on, the more you really recognize just, like, how vapid so much of it is and how it really really just doesn't have that much to say in the grand scheme of things. You do have two great performances here from Steven Yeun and Kristen Stewart, and I do hope that in the future these two do actually have, Sam and Andrew Zakuro have a successful career, because I definitely do see what they're trying to communicate, but unfortunately here it just really was lost in translation. It just was not nearly as effective as I think they wanted it to be. So overall, I just wasn't really a huge fan of this one. So C for Love Me. I think there's definitely an audience that's going to enjoy this one a lot. I can absolutely see this being one that film festivals you don't hear the greatest things about, but then it comes out in a wider release and people really start to like it more. But for me, I just found this to be such a disappointment, and really the only real miss of the Sundance movies I'm talking about here. The next film, however, Dee Dee, is fantastic and absolutely, I think, one of the highlights of this entire festival. Right off the bat, this is another one I went into. I literally knew nothing. The other ones I'm talking about, I already have plans to watch. This one, I literally just bought on a whim. Everybody was praising it coming out of, when they first saw it at Sundance and things like that. And so I was like, I need to get my hands on a screening of this one. I need to see this for myself and see exactly what this is. And my God, I am so happy I made this decision, because I honestly kind of fell in love with this movie. There's so much this film does so incredibly well. The way it authentically portrays this journey of this 13-year-old and just how awkward and kind of cringy his life really is. It's just so well handled. And the one thing right off the bat that absolutely anchors this movie is Sean Wan's directing. His passion and his sort of personal touch he brings to this film, it just makes it feel so much more effective, so much more fun. He just does such a great job of having that throughout the movie. You really just feel his personal touch and also just his love for his family. He does such a great job with that here, but it also is just so incredibly authentic with how he decides to go about it. And he, really portrays this in the most, raw way possible when it comes to the way he showcases this family. Especially since, he said this film is basically just pulling from his childhood within, 2008 and the early days of YouTube and things like that. He does such a great job of portraying that in this movie. It really does feel like his passion project in that way, and I think the film is elevated that much more because of his directing. Because yes, there are elements of this that do feel fairly familiar. It does go down a pretty standard coming of age path, but I think it does it in a way that is so effective in the way it goes about. The character of Chris especially, I think, is so well handled in this movie. He starts off the movie and he knows who he is. He feels so good about himself. He jokes around with his friends, makes a lot of offensive jokes and things like that. There's this girl that he likes that he's kind of unsure of talking to, but for the most part he feels good about himself. But as the movie goes on and he starts to recognize things about himself, and he starts to realize more of who he is, there's other people that come into his life, he really starts to shift as a character. He tries to change his persona in so many different ways for numerous people in the movie, and I think the film portrays that very well. I think we've all kind of been in Chris's shoes, where it's we want to try to appeal to them as much as we possibly can. We want to try to be our best selves, and I think that switching of personalities is just so well handled. Chris always feels a need to reinvent himself in this movie. If he's talking to his friends, he acts completely differently than he does around the girl that he likes, or he acts very differently around this other group of friends that he encounters. And I think all of that is very well done in this movie. We've all found ourselves, especially in the dawn of adolescence, at 13, 14, 12, 13, 14 years old, we're all trying to still find ourselves and figure out who we really are, but also we are feeling like we have to change who we are for other people, and that's exactly what Chris is going through in this movie, and I think that dilemma is handled so well here. But also, Isaac Wang in this movie is just phenomenal here. Gives such a strong child performance. I've seen him in a couple things prior to this. He was in Raya and the Last Dragon, but this is really his shining moment, I think. I think everyone's going to watch this movie, and one of the big things they're going to take away is his performance, and he is just fantastic here. I mean, he gives such a natural performance as Chris, who at points could come across as very unlikable with how he acts in this movie, but he brings so much relatability and likability to this character that it really is impossible to not be won over by his performance. I mean, Chris, again, is someone that's you're gonna find yourselves relating to in many different areas. I think just the awkward situations he keeps getting himself involved in, Wang just portrays them so well, but he also, again, it has just such incredible comedic timing in this movie. Because I also should mention, this film is absolutely hysterical at points. I was laughing so hard at so many different moments in this movie, and not just because of a joke that a character said, but because of the way this situation goes down, because of the relatability in it, and sometimes it can come across, like I said, as very cringeworthy, and sometimes even kind of scary at points, and I think they do a really good job of that, but you're also constantly howling at the situations he gets himself in. You're like, oh my god, Chris, why are you such an idiot? Why would you decide to say this thing in that way? Why would you go about this in that way? There's this one scene especially involving his friend and this girl that these other friends that his friend likes at this restaurant, and this joke that Chris tells, and oh my god, just his delivery in that scene, absolutely incredible. I thought he just did such a great job there. I was so impressed by his performance. The other actors are really great here. I specifically want to highlight Joan Chen in this movie, who plays his mom. I thought did a really good job in this movie. The character of Chung Sing actually has a pretty pivotal role in this film. She starts off as someone that Chris just doesn't really appreciate all that much. She's always concerned about him. She's always worried about him. He doesn't really understand why, but she also is going through her own issues. You know, she's trying to be this artist of sorts. She's kind of put her whole life on hold to become this artist, and you see the struggles that she is going through. You see the life that she's kind of made for herself, and I think the movie does a good job of diving deep into all of that. I really enjoyed her performance throughout this movie, and just the layers of her character I thought was just so well done here. I really enjoyed what we got from her here. I think she was another really big standout. Also, I gotta say, Shirley Chen in this movie is also very good as the character of Vivian, who plays his sister. Very interesting direction they took her character in, but I really enjoyed her. Chang Li Hu was very good as his grandmother Nai Nai in this movie. I really enjoyed her. All of the actors are fantastic here. All of them just really kill it in this film. But again, I think the screenplay is also so well done in this movie. It knows when to be funny, but it also knows when to have that heart. The movie has so much to say about the love for your family and for your culture, and how you may not have that at first, but through certain incidents, through certain things that happen to Chris, he starts to gain a much deeper appreciation for both of those things in this film. And I think that's something that this movie just does very well here. The genuine love and care that this movie has is just kind of infectious, and that's something I think they just did a really good job with when it came to the screenplay in this movie. It really just strikes a chord with you, especially in the film's most emotional moments when he's starting to appreciate his family more. The film does a really good job with, but it also, again, will have you simultaneously laughing hysterically at the situations he goes through, but also the way the film depicts like the early rise of social media, the way these characters are interacting with it and things like that. It kind of takes you back to a simpler time when YouTube was in its infancy and people were just kind of posting the most random shit possible. It's very interesting to look back on in this movie, and you can tell that is a time that Juan holds very fondly, and I think that, again, his screenplay is just very well handled here. There's so much I enjoyed about this movie. Again, seeing the directions that, Chris went into. Yes, some of them can feel like we've seen this before, but the movie does enough to make it stand out on its own, and I thought they did a really good job with that. This is just a really fantastic film all around. The cinematography also very good here. The way it's shot and things like that almost feels like a home movie at points, and I really did enjoy the cinematography here. The score as well is just really great. Overall, I mean, this is just a very, very well done coming of age film. I think the only thing that brings it down is that there are some characters that are introduced early on in the film that don't end up being nearly as big as they maybe should have been. There's some things I want to see a little bit more focus on, but overall, with the things this movie's accomplishing, it does very well here. It can be very similar to Eighth Grade in the way that it portrays just the awkwardness of adolescence and just the pure anxiety that you feel throughout it. This movie does such an incredible job with it, but it goes in its own directions. It does its own thing. It has a genuine love for family and culture and all that stuff, and I think all of that is just so well done here. This is easily going to be, I think, one of the biggest crowd pleasers of the year. There's no surprise that this won the audience award. It's very easy to see why that happened. I think this is a very easy movie to get behind. So yeah, I really enjoyed this one a lot. Definitely one of the biggest highlights of the festival for me. A- for Dee. I honestly can't praise this one enough. Absolutely one of the highest recommendations of the festival. Girls Will Be Girls is another one that I really didn't know much of anything going into. I actually thought this was going to be like another coming-of-age film kind of similar to Dee, and it is, but it is a much different film than I anticipated it to be, because it kind of starts off and it's this very simple story. You have this teenage girl, she's trying to rebel against like these very like stringent guidelines that this boarding school has, and they are so adamant about things involving, you know, sexual acts and things like that, always, you know, blaming women for wearing, you know, certain clothes and things like that, and telling them how to dress and how to act, and just generally just being very nasty and sexist, and her kind of trying to rebel against that, and her, you know, liking this guy, and her involving and getting into these like sexual acts with him, and that ends up being a very large part of the first half of this movie, and then it kind of turns into much more of this love story, but not really about her and this boy. It's much more about her and her mother, and the limitations that her mother had, and the things that she wasn't able to do on her own, because of the boarding school and these guidelines, and sort of the life that was like taken away from her, and how now she's trying to kind of live her life vicariously through her. So it's a very interesting story, the way they went about it, and how, you know, certain things that happen in the movie bring these two closer together, and it ends up being a much more complex film than I kind of expected it to be, and there's a lot to really like about it. I think Preeti Panagrani's performance is just fantastic here as Mira. She is so good in this movie, so captivating as this character. I mean, again, you see her as the person that, you know, she doesn't care about the rules that are going on here. She wants to go against them. She wants to discover things for herself. She's doing things that other women in this school just will not do, and I really enjoyed seeing that from her here. I think she's the kind of performance that you really just latch onto in this movie. She's so fun and likable, but she also has this sensitivity to her, and I think that she just gives such a strong performance in this movie. She's definitely a future star to watch out for. I mean, she just has so much confidence and just such an incredible range in this film. I can't wait to see more of her, but I gotta say, Connie Kuzrati maybe stole the entire movie for me. You know, her playing this character of this mother who really just never has gotten to live the life that she wanted. She sees the freedom that her daughter has, and she's never really gotten the chance to fully express it, but she gets to in this movie, and I think that she just does such a incredible job here of portraying this character, because it could become a character that's very like overbearing and annoying, but she adds a vulnerability to this character and empathy that otherwise wouldn't be there, and I think that she just does a really great job. I really enjoyed her character, particularly in the third act of this movie, as we really see her take on this, you know, role for her daughter, and these two start to understand each other more. I mean, that really is when this film is at its best, and I think just does a really great job. But the directing from Suchi Talati also, I think, is just so well done here. I've only seen one other film from her in the past. It was a short film. It's called A Period Piece. I really didn't like that movie at all. I found it to be very just kind of tedious and kind of dumb. This, however, I thought she did a much better job with. They're similar to Dee Dee. There's so much of a personal touch put into this. She talked about how the school that this is based upon is like very much like her school that she went to. They were just as strict. They were just as like, you know, sort of completely just like ignorant towards all the like misogyny and all the like harassment that the women were facing in this school and things like that. And I think she does that so well here. She really depicts this harsh landscape, but also just really intimately presents the world that Mira inhabits, and really just kind of gives us a sense of just the constant shame that she's given and all these rules that are like bestowed upon her and all the other women within the school. I think that she just does a really good job with that, and also how much the school holds the patriarchy to like such a high standard. They're never going to call them out or, really like, take the proper action they need to. They're just going to defend their actions. And yes, we've seen this subject matter handled, before, but it's captured again in just such a intimate way here. I was really just impressed by that. And I think this film really just brings a very fresh approach. It feels very raw and realistic and how it all plays out. I think, she does a great job of that, especially framing it around a mother and daughter. I think was just a really good idea, especially getting to see her mother and the way that she evolves throughout this movie. When Mira is getting closer to this guy Shri, her mother Anila also forms this bond with him, and it honestly becomes very interesting to watch how that ends up going, seeing all these moments of her talking about when she was Mira's age and what she had to go through in her marriage and things like that. All of it's just really interesting to hear about, but it's also really sad to hear about, again, the limitations that she had to face throughout her life. You really do feel for her here, and I think the movie does a really good job with that. But also, again, just showing these very incredibly problematic values that have completely just eroded throughout the school, and just how blindly everyone goes along with it, but how Mira is the one person that is willing to defy that. She sees, just how horrible this is. She discovers her own, like, sexual liberation. I mean, it's just really fascinating to watch, and I really like the way the movie went about all of that. But again, her mother's reaction to it is really what makes it that much more powerful. But also her character arc that Mira goes down, it really just ends up being very emotional to watch. 1 second it's very lighthearted as you're watching her, discover different sexual things and her trying them out with Shri gradually, whether it's because she feels a connection to him or not, or just wanting to feel it and experiment with it. It's very interesting to watch, but then it turns into something a lot more traumatic than that as we start to see the way other guys are reacting to what Mira is doing. And I thought that was very interesting. There's one direction the film went in the third act especially that was generally shocking to me and honestly kind of terrifying the way they went about it, and I thought that all of that was just very well communicated. The screenplay in general is just very sharp here. It's not perfect though. There are some things that do bring it down, and I think the main thing is that the movie is a little bit too long. It is almost 2 hours, and it definitely did not need to be. There is a lot of time spent in this movie just watching Mira and Shri and her engage in these sexual acts, and sometimes it just can feel a bit dragged out. And I think if the movie trims some of the fat, it would have flowed that much better. I think the movie is best when it's, again, focusing around those conversations with her and her mother. I think that's really like the strongest part of this entire movie, and I think they do a really good job with that. But the third act as well, it's just so riveting, but it also ends on a generally just very sweet note, and it's a very celebratory note that I really did enjoy seeing. Also, the choice to present this movie in 1.85.1 aspect ratio was such a good one. It makes the film feel so much more personal. We're pretty much seeing everything through Mira's perspective. We don't really leave it. Anything that happens, we don't see it until Mira does. And I think that works to the film, but it also is kind of a detriment at points because there's things that happen here that kind of feel like they're just kind of coming out of nowhere, and I wish the movie would have further developed them a bit more, and I think that does bring it down. But the ending, like I said, is just so satisfying. It's one of the most quietly emotional endings I've seen in a very long time. Really just says a lot about women and how all the stuff they go through can be healed through the connection. Like I said, it can be a bit overlong at times, but overall, I just really enjoyed watching this one. I thought that it went in a very in different direction than I was expecting it to. It starts off fairly familiar, but it really does become something very powerful by the end. Some great directing, some great performances. This is definitely one I do recommend watching. So B+ for Girls Will Be Girls. I don't think this is an amazing film, but it definitely is a really strong one that I think a lot of people are really gonna like. Oh my god, it's totally the same day. I'm totally not filming this like a week later and continuing this video. But regardless, we're going to talk about the next film here, which is one that like a lot of people were raving about. One of the biggest hits coming out of Sundance, and that is A Real Pain. And honestly, it's very easy to see why. Now, I will say right off the bat, Jesse Eisenberg is an actor that I've always really enjoyed. Was not a fan of his previous film that he directed, When You Finish Saving the World. I was really excited for it, but I just felt that it was quite vapid, didn't do a great job of really building its themes, building its characters. Both of the central performances were fine, but it was very repetitive, and it just didn't really feel like he had much of a central thesis other than, like, these are two, like, very privileged people who are very hypocritical, and they're just going to continue being the same way. One of them might face consequences, but they're very minimal. Like, it just didn't really feel like it had all that much to say. I didn't hate it by any means, but I just felt it was a very poor debut. So while I was excited for this film, I still was a little bit hesitant. But then, reviews came out and it was pretty much unanimously positive. And yeah, this is a huge improvement on so many fronts. And I think one of the huge reasons for that right off the bat is just the personal connection that Eisenberg has to this story in particular. I don't know how much of it is based off of his real life, based on the directions the story goes, but you can just tell his personal touch throughout this movie, his respect to his ancestry, especially from his Jewish heritage, and things about like the Holocaust and things like that, what they had to go through, and sort of how so many of them have been forgotten, and kind of cherishing your roots and never forgetting where you came from. That's a lot of what this film is trying to dive into, but having all that through the lens of these two cousins who could not be any different. They've both become recently estranged. One of them is very well off. This is Jesse Eisenberg's character, very well off in life. He has a wife, he has a job, he's very successful, but he's very quiet and kind of distant. Meanwhile, you have Kieran Culkin, who is way more outgoing. He's very friendly with people. He's very he's very passionate about what he has to say. He always seems to have something to say about these landmarks they come across, but he lives kind of this reclusive lifestyle. He doesn't really have a lot going for him. He has had a lot of outbursts and things like that, and the film really is getting into both the impact of this meeting with them going on this, with them going to this museum and experiencing things about like their family and things like that, but also getting to see these two connect, but also sort of the tensions between them. There's a lot of reasonings for why these two have the relationship that they do, why they haven't really been there for each other. There is an incredible scene in a restaurant, and it really kind of gives us a chance to get to see who both of these characters are, but also the complexities of them, because while Jesse Eisenberg's character seems more together, there's a little bit more going on with him. You actually understand why he is the way he is, but also why he hasn't really been there for Kieran Culkin's character, and I think it's something the movie does a really good job with, really giving us insight into both of these characters very well. And the performances also are just fantastic here. Jesse Eisenberg is giving some of the best work he's given as an actor in a very long time. I feel like he's been good, but not to the extent that he is here. He just pours his heart and soul into this film. There's a monologue that he has especially that just really blew me away. It was just so authentic, the way he went about this character. The raw emotions were just so well handled. But my God, Kieran Culkin is giving such a incredible performance here that is practically begging for an Oscar. Just the lengths that he goes to sell this character that, again, is very approachable, is someone that people tend to gravitate to, but also has so much trauma going on within him that he has unexplored, and has so much resentment for his cousin, is just so well handled to watch in this movie. He is a very complex character, and Culkin just really dives into every single facet. Hell, I even heard that there's things about him that weren't even in the script. He didn't really go on script, and this made for that much stronger of a performance. It really just feels like he went all out here in conveying this character, and thank God, because he is just incredible in this movie, and he's definitely going to be a performance that I think we're going to hear about for the rest of the year. This film was picked up by Searchlight, who tends to do pretty good with releasing their films, giving it the proper promotion, so I really hope they're able to do that with this one, because I think if they can, this could really end up going somewhere special. Like I said, I think the screenplay is very well done here. The personal connection to both of these characters, but then also the way they dive into, you know, the history and things like that. It's all really well done here. And these are two people who, like I said, they're living such different lives, but yet they actually have very similar feelings towards each other. There's a lot of sort of pent-up frustration, a lot of painful memories that these two really have to confront in this film, and they haven't really done so until now. They've kind of brushed it aside. They haven't really brought it up. For a while, it seems like these two are just kind of enjoying each other's company, but the more the film goes on, the more we really start to dive deep into what is the root for this happening. Why are they actually meeting up here? Is it just because their grandmother has died recently and they're there to sort of go through Poland and, you know, take this tour and, you know, find out where she came from? Or is there something a little bit more contentious going on here? And the film really does do a good job of diving deep into all of that. And I really do think the film is at its best when it puts those two characters firmly at the center. And like I said, the characterization between the two is just so strong here. The ending in particular is so great. The way this film wraps up, oh my god, it ends on such a haunting ending that just really ends up lingering with you. It's definitely one of the best endings out of any film I talked about at Sundance this year. There's also a great blend of comedy and drama. The film is consistently very funny, but yet it also has this great emotional touch to it. And I feel like that's something that Eisenberg kind of struggled with in his previous film. He didn't know when to kind of dial it back, and here he just does such a great job of knowing when to be funny, but also when to have this very sentimental touch to it. And I think it really is due to, again, how much he cares about telling this story, how much this matters to him. I think moving forward, this is what Eisenberg needs to do. Don't tell a story unless it's something that you're truly passionate about. You know, don't just try to tell this story about these two very irredeemable people that has no discernible ending. Tell a story about something that matters to you, something that's meaningful, and it's going to work that much better. I mean, there's just so much to love about this one. The only thing that brings it down for me is that there are some other, like, characters that we meet along the way here that just don't have quite as much to do. There's one character in particular that I thought was maybe going to have a little bit more of a focus and really doesn't, and I wish we could have dived a bit deeper into that. But other than that, I mean, I really love this film a lot. I think this is easily like the definition of like a huge crowd pleaser for many people. It's got a great exploration of Jewish history, this really strong screenplay, very good cinematography as well. I mean, you really do, it feels very lived in when it comes to this tour in Poland. It's because they actually did go to a lot of these places. Eisenberg talked about how, you know, they shot in these places, and it meant that, you know, because he wanted it to feel that much more authentic. He wanted it to feel that much more real, and I think that was a very good decision because it really does work very well for this film. It's not a perfect movie, but it's one that the more I sit on it, the more I really just end up loving it, and I think a lot of people will be just as affected by it. This is easily one of the best films that I'm talking about of the Sundance films I watched, so definitely A- for A Real Pain. Definitely a huge comeback for Eisenberg. Really hope this is the start of a great directorial career for him, and cannot wait to see what he does next. This is definitely one to be on the lookout for. All right, so this next film I'm talking about probably is actually no, not probably is the most divisive film at Sundance of the ones I'm talking about for sure, and that is Little Death. And look, there's going to be a lot of people who feel very passionately about this movie, whether that is on the love spectrum or the hate spectrum, and I will just say, I totally understand all reactions to this film because it is a very jarring and different kind of experience that I think some people are really going to dig, and I think the other half of people are really going to despise. Me, I'm honestly like right in the middle when it comes to this film. There are things that I really do like about it, and then there are things that just don't quite work as well. Starting right off the bat, I'll kind of just get into what this really is. This is a film that is very hard to describe without going into spoilers. It starts off and it is this very like hyper stylized meta commentary, pretty much all about like the changing landscape of Hollywood. You have this guy who is this, Hollywood producer of sorts, and he's very, like, disgruntled. He's very much just, like, not understanding why things need to change. He is very much just wanting to kind of keep things as they are, and, he is being told to change his entire story to, like, frame it around like a female perspective and things like that, and he's not really about that. He kind of just wants to leave it as it is. Meanwhile, he's also going through his own sort of like midlife crisis of sorts. There are these visions he keeps having, some of which are like incredibly violent, and it's just really starting to eat away at him. And the one thing I will say is David Schwimmer is fantastic in this movie. I really want to see him in like more things because I think he finds a way to like pop up in the most unexpected of projects, and he does a really good job with that. I like what this film is trying to say about this TV writer who just kind of wants to keep things as they are, doesn't understand why things need to evolve, doesn't understand why he needs to cater to certain demographics. He's just very ignorant. He doesn't really want to listen to anything, and that can be a very hard character to follow, and I'll get into why some of that doesn't exactly work, but I think the film does make some very effective points. There is something they do, literally like, I don't know, like 10, 15 minutes in the film that was like extremely jarring to me, but I thought honestly did make its point very well. And I don't really want to get into it because it's something that I don't think a lot of people are going to suspect. I've seen some reviews hinted at it. I'm not going to do that because it's something that I did not know going into this movie. And I think it actually is better to not know. And all I'll say is that I thought it was very effective in what they were trying to communicate. And I really liked the way that all played out here. So I think that part of the movie works really well. What doesn't work quite as well is what the movie's trying to get at, how the movie decides to go about these ideas. A lot of it is communicated through, like I said, a very hyper stylized sort of feel. There is a lot of voiceover. It almost feels like it almost feels like a Lars von Trier movie at points with the way things are going down. There is a lot of visuals here, some of which unfortunately I think is AI art, and I really hope it's not. Like, I've been hearing a lot of people say that, and I really hope that's not the case because I just don't want to live in a world where AI art is used as like an actual is used as a crutch for what could have actually been like really impressive cinematography and animation. I feel like any animation you can get out of someone who is an artist is going to come off way more effective than it does here, and a lot of it is very distracting. And I have heard that Jack Beggart had a really weird reasoning as to why, but if that is the case, I really hope that's not the case in this movie because but at the same time a lot of it was very distracting, so I'm not surprised if it ends up being that way. But I also think the film can get very repetitive. It's kind of just exploring the same ideas, having similar conversations, not really going as many places with it. There's another whole subplot between him and Jenna Malone's character, and I never really felt as attached to that as I needed to be. But then probably the biggest thing to talk about with this movie is that that's only half the film. Without getting into it too much, about, I want to say, halfway through this movie, it turns into something else entirely. We focus around two completely different characters, Dominic Fike and Talia Ryder, both of which are very good in the movie, but almost feels like a completely different movie. All the hyper stylization is gone, the voiceover's gone, it turns into a far more conventional narrative. But honestly, I think this half of the film is actually a lot better than what came beforehand. It's not that the David Schwimmer half of the film isn't effective, it just can get very maddening. It can become a lot, and it's kind of hard to tell, it's kind of hard to fully zero in on what they're really communicating, and I think it becomes kind of distracting. This part of the film feels a lot more effective in what it's trying to communicate. It has a lot to say about addiction, and it has a lot to say about sort of how hard that can really be, the toll it can take on you, but also sort of like just, paths you've taken in life, sort of, where you thought you were going to be versus where you actually are. I think the movie has a lot to say about that stuff, and it actually ends on a pretty thoughtful note. So yeah, it really is a very hard movie to review. Like I said, I think Dominic Fike and Talia Ryder are very good, and I think that second half of the film, a lot of it is going to depend on whether or not you enjoy watching these two actors, and I very much do. I've enjoyed them in everything I've seen them in, and I think they work very well together here. Talia Ryder especially is fantastic in this movie. I could really just watch her in anything. I've been a fan of hers since Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always, and she just continues to, I think, deliver as an actress. I really have just loved what I've been seeing from her. But yeah, overall, it's a really strange movie to talk about. There are things that I like, there are things that I don't like as much. I think Jack Beggart, the big takeaway is that he's a very ambitious director. I think he has a real future here. There's a lot of ideas he's trying to communicate. I don't think all of them come across as well as they need to. And while I think it's a fine idea to like have these two distinctly different films and put them together, they're almost too different. There is something that connects them. It's not like they're completely just like separate from each other. There absolutely is something that connects them together, especially towards the end of the movie. I think they do a good job of, wrapping up both halves, but they almost feel like they could have been more effective if this was maybe just like a two-part film. Like if Jack Beggart had done an entire movie about David Schwimmer's character, I think that could be really effective. But on the flip side, if you did a whole movie about Talia Ryder and Dominic Fike's characters, I think that also could have been very effective. But as one movie, it just feels like a little bit too much. It doesn't feel like we're getting enough from either half. I think we get enough from the Talia Ryder and Dominic Fike half, mainly because, again, it really does kind of slow things down. It becomes more of this sort of lo-fi sort of character study, not character study, but like this more sort of hangout film that also has to do with addiction and things like that. There's a little bit more thrown in there that I think works really well, whereas, like I said, the David Schwimmer half is way more just like intense and just like throws a lot at you. It's very much an adrenaline rush in that way. Like I said, I think it's a really good idea to try to make this film that like morphs into two. It's a very ambitious idea, but I just think it might have worked a little bit better if it was just two full-length films. I was surprised by the end how well the themes did connect together. That is something that did admittedly impress me by the end of the movie, but I don't think it changes the fact that I really do think it would have worked better if it would have been two films. Like I said, there's a lot of things I could have done without. The AI art especially, that's very prevalent throughout the first half of the film, does not really work. There's some things also that I just don't think fully ties together. Like, there's characters that show up in the first half of the movie, and you look at the characters in the second half, and I'm like, how does this connect? How do they live in the same universe? I just don't fully understand that. I do think this film can come across as very disjointed. The first half especially, like I said, very maddening, very very overly stylistic to the point where it's hard to tell what's even happening, but at the same time it's kind of telling this very basic story that I think needed a little bit more substance to it. But the second half I think really slows things down and honestly does become pretty effective. So overall, I did enjoy this one. It's a really hard movie to talk about, but I do think for what it is very gripping. It is very impressive. I can't say I was ever bored watching watching this movie, I can't say I was ever not into this film. I was always interested to see how this was going to turn out, especially by the big swing the film did take by the end of it. I really was impressed by the directions they decided to go. I think, like I said, if this would have been 2 films, it might have turned out better, but I really do appreciate the big swings that Beggart takes here. The directions he wants to go, the things he wants to explore. He does it very well in this movie. He has a lot of fresh ideas, and by the end, I honestly was impressed by what this ended up being. It's not a perfect film by any means, but I do really hope this is the start of what hopefully should be a bright future for him as a director. I absolutely can see Jack Beggart being someone that we recognize as a true talent, after this film and things like that. The movie is also produced by Darren Aronofsky, which is not surprising because it definitely does imbue a lot of his style. You can definitely tell that there's a clear influence from that. But overall, like I said, I did enjoy this one. It's not a perfect movie, but it is definitely one that I really have not been able to stop thinking about since I've seen it. So B- for Little Death. Like I said, very hard film to talk about, and I really do challenge anyone to do so, especially without delving into spoilers, considering the kind of movie that this is. But it's definitely one that, if you watch it, you absolutely are never going to forget. I don't think everybody's going to respond to it. Hell, I can see some people downright hating this film, but I do think if you're willing to take a chance on something that's really ambitious and different, I do think this film will definitely impress you. So, I'll be real, the next movie I'm talking about, Sugarcane, this is the only documentary I watched at the festival, and I really don't think I can fairly judge it. I did give it a grade on Letterboxd, I did talk a little bit about it, but if I'm being honest, I watched this movie when I was kind of tired, I was kind of in and out of sleep watching it. I did end up going back and watching it, but Sundance does this thing where you only have like 5-hour windows to watch movies, and so I wasn't able to go back and watch everything back that I missed, but of what I saw, I thought this film was extremely effective. It tells this very devastating story about all this abuse that has gone on within residential schools that, Indians have, faced, and things like all these natives have faced throughout the years. And it's very effective in communicating that. The stories that you hear are so incredibly devastating and just sickening to hear about. There's one very early on in the movie from this woman, and you can tell that this is the kind of story that like she's been wanting to tell for a very long time, but is kind of like just like kept it to herself. She's been very scared to do so, and seeing her finally do it and that weight that's lifted off her shoulders, but also just how emotional she is, was just so effective to watch, but it also feels very cathartic in that way, and I think this movie just does a really great job of diving into that. It's this very sort of stirring reminder of how we're always turning a blind eye to things that we might not even know are happening. I mean, these, this abuse that went on, all these things that have happened to these students, within this school have been going on for years, and nothing really has been done about it until now. And this film really is just doing a great job of unpacking all of that, why something like this takes place, why nobody speaks up. I think it's very effective in what it is trying to communicate, but also how the proper action can stop this from happening. And I think the movie does do a really good job with that. The cinematography also very strong here. There's some very hard-hitting moments. Like I said, I would love to talk about it more, but I feel like I definitely need to give this a second watch in order for me to fully dive into how I feel about this one. But for what I saw, it was extremely effective. I'm definitely interested to give it a second look at some point. So B for Sugarcane. I definitely do want to start talking more about documentaries on this channel. I feel like I've kind of neglected to, and that's something I've really wanted to do more within the years as I started to branch out and watch more movies. This is one of the things that I really do want to do, and like I said, I'm hoping to give this film a second look at some point. Of what I saw, it was very effective, but that's really all I can say, because I don't think I was able to get the fullest, grasp out of it as I was hoping to. So that's really what I have to say about that one. Very effective film though, overall. Okay, so next film I'm talking about, listen, I saw quite a few movies at Sundance, but I don't think any of them moved me, affected me, or has stuck with me in the way that Exhibiting Forgiveness really has. And what's funny about this movie is I didn't even mean to watch this one initially. This is a film I was thinking about watching, but wasn't actually sure if I was going to. And so I hovered over the thing to add it to like my cart as like a possibility. And I ended up accidentally buying a ticket for it. And honestly, that is one of the best decisions I could have made, because this film is incredible. Like, if you had to ask me right now, what is the movie where it's like, you need to rush out and see this movie as soon as possible, it is undoubtedly this film. I mean, listen, there's so much to really talk about with this one. The performances in this film are absolutely incredible. Andre Holland is one of those actors I've always been a fan of, but I don't think has ever fully been utilized properly. I think he's had some really strong roles, but he's always kind of, like, he's never as prominent in the film as he needs to be. He never, he's stuck out for sure, but I don't think he's had that one big role yet where it's like, oh yeah, this is the one that's really going to propel him. And I think this is absolutely that role. I mean, this is such a raw and just incredibly layered performance. The character of Terrell has really gone through a lot within his life. He seems pretty content. He has a wife, he has kids, he is this very famous painter of sorts, and this is something that he's very passionate about. But he's also gone through a very traumatic childhood, and through reconnecting with his father, which is something he really doesn't want to do, he is reminded of all these painful memories that he went through that he's kind of repressed and hasn't really fully come to terms with, and he's really kind of re-exploring them here, and it gets him to kind of it gets him to kind of re-explore certain elements of himself and get him to really confront, how he was feeling within those moments. And I think that Holland just does such an incredible job throughout this movie. For a character like this that is so incredibly layered and has so much, grief and trauma that he's gone through, it takes a really strong actor to do that. And I don't think Holland has ever been as good as he is here. I mean, he pours his whole heart and soul into this role, really just diving deep into the troubles that Terrell has gone through, what has made him the way that he is, things that have stuck with him, kind of him re-exploring certain elements of himself. I mean, he just does such a incredible job here, but also how much this is emotionally breaking him. He doesn't want to have these conversations again. He doesn't want to have to re-explore these events, but because he's now reconnecting with his father, though, he still harbors all the anger, all the resentment he has towards him. It's all coming back, and he just does such a great job of diving into all of that and showing why forgiveness is such a difficult thing to muster for some people, why that is such a difficult thing to fully even entertain for this character. He does such a great job. There is one scene especially where he has this flashback of sorts to a past memory, and you see the effect it has on him, and my God, his reaction to that scene is easily the best work of his entire career, to the point where if he does not get an Oscar nomination for this movie, I will be so beyond shocked. Like, generally, this is the kind of role that he needs to do more of. This is the kind of role that fully utilizes him as an actor. He is just so incredible in this movie. I need to see more of this Andre Holland immediately. He was just fantastic here. Just absolutely the best work of his career. I really could just go on and on and on. I thought he was just phenomenal in this film. But John Earl Jelks also is just great here. He brings so many layers to a character that could be so incredibly one-note and could be so incredibly contrived. I mean, how many times have we seen like an abusive father that's hard on his son? But Jelks brings so much more to him. You really do feel for this character. You understand the harsh upbringing that he's had and why he is the way he is, and why in his mind what he was doing for his son he didn't really deem as wrong. He saw it as just harsh parenting that he needed to because of the way things were going and the way that he was brought up. And you really do understand his character, but you also understand that he is trying to do right. He is finally recognizing what he did wrong, and he wants to try to make it right. And he just does such a great job of bringing so much humanity to this character. He feels so real. It really gets you a chance to understand that, like, people who do things, like Jelk's character has, they don't mean it with ill intent, but it has caused harm on other individuals, and this is something he hasn't fully recognized until this second. He is starting to finally come to terms with the fact that he has hurt his son, and it has done a number on him, and I thought he just did such a fantastic job in this movie. Anjanou Ellis-Taylor also really has just been on a hot streak between this and Origin, and she just gives another really fantastic performance. I think maybe bringing the most humanity of the film to anyone with the character she ends up playing in this movie. She has some very tough scenes in this film, and she really just kills it all with ease. I was just very impressed by her character, but it really is the direction here by Typhus Kafer that just really impressed me. I mean, he has such confidence and such a strong vision for this film. He has a real love for art. He is a painter in real life. This is a coping mechanism for him. Same with the character of Terrell, and the way that he's able to showcase that through this movie, it's so well done. It gives this film a personal touch that only helps elevate it. This is a very emotionally striking film, but I think he just does a great job of pushing it that much further to something that really just ends up having an impact on you. I think anyone that's ever had some sort of difficulty with somebody in their life, whether it's a friend, a parent, a grandparent, even an acquaintance, even like someone that they don't even know, like a neighbor or something like that, this film will absolutely get to you. This film really just does a great job of showing how hard it is to put aside that anger, put aside that sort of tension. So many times in films we see a character just putting aside their differences so easily just through one conversation, and what this film shows is that it's not that easy. It's not easy to just put all that aside and move on and just pretend like everything's okay. No, there's some real tough shit that this character went through. There's a lot that Terrell has gone through, and you really do understand why it has lingered so much on him, but also the effect it's had on him, not just as an individual, but as a parent, what he's trying to prevent, for his son. The life that he's trying to give him currently, I think, is also just really well communicated in this film. Again, it just feels so much more authentic. It shows how messy this is. This is not something that Terrell really wants to do. He doesn't really want, and you wonder, does he even want to reconnect with his father? And you don't necessarily blame him, especially as this film does a really good job of gradually showcasing the memories of what actually happened and really getting you to understand why Terrell feels the way that he does. And what I liked about the movie is that it doesn't try to force it all on you. It does it pretty gradually. There was a point in the movie where I was like, are we going to get more flashbacks? And then we did, and it ended up being that much more effective as a result. I like the way this film, presents these memories and really just showcases them in the most raw way possible. It never tries to undercut the real sort of impact that this has had on this character. It never tries to diminish any of the violence that he went through, but it presents it in a very nuanced manner. It gets you to understand both of these characters' perspectives, what they were trying to do, but also just present how harmful this really was and the effect it's had on him. I mean, all of these characters are so incredibly flawed. There's nobody in this movie that is presented in a way where they are perfect at what they do. Terrell may seem that way, but there are things that he deals with. He's not good with conflict. He's not good with having to, dredge up these past memories. He's not good at talking about them in a rational way. It has a very big effect on him, and the movie does a great job at showing that. This is not as black and white as it may seem. It might seem that way to Terrell, but it's not as black and white. When you start to see his father's perspective and what he was going through, I mean, all of that is just so well communicated in this movie. The depth that this whole situation is given, I think they just do such a great job with. So yeah, there's really just so much to love about this one. Like I said, the passion that he has for his art as well throughout this movie is just so well handled here. There's a great sense of artistry, although that really is one of my only issues with this movie. There is a subplot of sorts where Terrell is in this art gallery. He's trying to, he's trying to sell off artwork, and there's a moment where he's kind of talking more about his art, and they try to incorporate this theme of like racism and people not really, caring about artistic integrity and things like that. And I felt that part of the movie wasn't quite as dived into as it needed to be. I felt that honestly was something that they could have done a little bit more with. The film is very much focused on this conflict and very much focused on the effect it's had on Terrell, that I feel like other storylines just weren't quite as well dived into. Andra Day, as much as I do like her in the film, and I do think she does give a good performance in this movie, really just ends up not having all that much to do here. You do see the effect this has on her character, but that's really only communicated in a few moments. There's some good moments showcasing her as an artist, and that's something I did appreciate. Similar to how Terrell communicates his strife and his sort of pain through art, she channels it through her music, and I think that's something I did enjoy seeing. I just wish we got to see a little bit more of it. I think the two of them actually have a really good chemistry, and I would have liked to see a little bit more of, again, just the way this is affecting their marriage, the way this is affecting her character. This is the first time she's hearing about these things. She hasn't known any of what he's gone through because he hasn't wanted to open up about it, and I just wish the film would have dived a little bit deeper into that. But other than that, I mean, this is just such a powerful watch that just had me riveted from start to finish. It ends in a way that was so incredibly emotional, but didn't feel at all like emotionally manipulative. It felt like this is how this would end. Like this conflict in particular, this is absolutely how it would wrap up, and it's so refreshing in that way. Like I said, there's so many movies that try to resolve this in such a hackneyed manner, in such a way that feels so easy, and this film recognized that it's not easy to move past these things. It's not easy to even talk about them. You might not even want to talk about them, and that's exactly how Terrell is. It's bottled up inside of him, and you see him just finally get to release it, and it is just so incredible in the way it's done. It's a very dense film. It's definitely hard to watch at points. Like when Titus Kafer came on, they do those little like director intros like before the movie starts. Like, this is a really hard watch. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm sure it is. And it's a very uncomfortable watch at points. There's some scenes that are definitely going to be stuck in my mind for a very long time. This really is a must watch. I really just can't recommend this one enough. This is a film I'm going to be talking about all year. I don't know when this is coming out. I don't know what distributor picks this up, but I am begging that it happens soon, because I cannot wait for more people to witness this one. This is going to be just such an incredible watch for so many people. It's the kind of movie that you just need to seek out whenever you can. I really just can't recommend this film enough. The way I felt about Mass is how I feel about this one. I don't like this movie as much as I did Mass, but it is a film where if you had to ask me right now, what is the movie that I have thought the most about at Sundance, it is absolutely this one. I really just can't recommend this one enough. For Exhibiting Forgiveness. Like I said, it's not a perfect movie, but its rawness and its emotional honesty, and also its incredible performances, particularly from Andre Holland and John Earl Jelks, just really have resonated with me in a very powerful way. I can't recommend this one enough. It's a film I will be buzzing about and recommending to everybody throughout the rest of the year. Please do not skip out on this one whenever it comes out. Absolutely the highlight of the festival for me. Okay, and the final movie I will be talking about is Ponyboy, and this is one that caught my attention pretty quickly. I didn't really know anything about it other than I knew River Gallo was the star, who I was actually really excited to see. I saw a documentary about them called Everybody, which I thought was actually pretty effective. It wasn't phenomenal. There were definitely some things that I didn't love about it, but the one thing that absolutely stuck with me in that film are the three individuals we focused on in the movie, and River Gallo was definitely one of them. I didn't know much about them, being this actor. I didn't know much about them in terms of who they were, but, the film, that documentary did dive a bit into them being intersex and sort of like the struggles that they have with that, and I thought this film dived into all of that very well. But what really impressed me with this is that it really is this genre hybrid of sorts. I mean, the movie, yes, is this great sort of character study about identity and self-discovery and just finding true happiness within oneself and not trying to, not trying to put your whole self-worth onto how other people judge you, and just recognizing sometimes you just need to be you, and that is okay. But it also is this like incredibly like anxiety ridden, like edge of your seat crime thriller. And the thing is, it actually blends those things like incredibly well. It's not like Little Death where it comes off as jarring. Like, no, these things actually go together very well in this movie, and that's something I really didn't expect. I had a feeling this film was going to be something really special, but I didn't realize how singular it was going to feel. I mean, this movie is relatively simple. We have this intersex worker of sorts. It takes place over one night on Valentine's Day. There is, Ponyboy is this drug dealer of sorts who also, like I said, is this sex worker, and something ends up happening, and basically it forces him to kind of just it forces him to kind of go on the run. There's this whole sort of, crime that's going on. I don't really want to get into it too much, but it also is but while doing this, he's also rethinking his past and thinking about these painful memories that he had, and I thought all of that was just really well communicate in this movie. And one of the things I think that works so well is River Gallo's performance. I mean, it is tremendous here. This is such a strong breakthrough performance, really just diving into the confusion and just the dysphoria that Ponyboy constantly feels. There's a lot of childhood drama that Ponyboy has faced, and because of that, it's gotten him to kind of not really know who he's supposed to be. And on one hand, yes, he feels like he is, someone who is this sex worker, but on the other hand, he feels like he can be a lot more. And, he's been told by his parents to be one way, but he's told by other people to be a different way. And it's very fascinating to watch him kind of go through this arc of sorts of, in the midst of, like I said, all this crazy shit that's going on with this, with this mob that's after him. Also seeing him kind of recognize, like, who really am I and things like that. It's a very interesting journey to watch. And there's just River Gallo is just such a dynamic actor. They give such a strong performance in this movie. As a character, Ponyboy is also very compelling. I mean, they've been told all their life to act a certain way, to be a certain way, to reject certain things about themselves. And, through something that's happening recently, through news they end up receiving, they're now rethinking that and thinking, is that actually how I'm supposed to be? Or is there something else that I'm not really embracing as much? And I thought that was probably the strongest part about this movie. The film really is at its best when we're diving into that. The best scene in the entire film involves Ponyboy talking to this other sex worker played by India Moore, and kind of similar struggles that they've had. India Moore is transgender, while Ponyboy is intersex, and it gets them to kind of have this really intimate discussion about the discrimination that they've both faced, but also things that Ponyboy might go through that she can't relate to, and vice versa. And it's easily one of the most thoughtful moments of any movie I watched at Sundance. I thought it was such a powerful scene. Does a great job of getting you to understand both these characters, but also the film perfectly sums up its message of what it's really trying to go through and of what it's really trying to get at. And I think they do a really good job with that. But like I said, as a film, I mean, there's so much more to talk about here. As good as River Gallo is, Dylan O'Brien also is one of the best parts of this movie. He's such a huge standout here. I mean, this is a role that is nothing like I've seen him do before. He is playing this very vile, very misogynistic character, this just someone that you don't really want anything to do with. He's very much this sleazeball of sorts, but he also is someone that you find yourself very compelled by, because O'Brien just does such a great job of bringing this character to life, bringing so much charisma, so much sort of likability to this character for someone who, like I said, is such a for someone who is such an unlikable character, he finds a way to bring a sense of charisma to him, and he does a really great job with that here. And it's the kind of role I kind of want to see O'Brien, pursue more. We always see him play similar characters, but this kind of felt like he's playing the character he was trying to do in Not Okay, but it worked a lot better here. And again, I don't really want to say much more, but this is a performance that truly needs to be seen to be believed, and he is just really great here. I thought he really nailed this character very well. He was definitely a really big standout. Victoria Pedretti also very good here. She's not in the movie as much as I thought she would have been, but then as the film goes on, she started to be, and I really enjoyed her. Murray Bartlett also is a really big standout. Like I said, it's just a really strong cast overall, but the direction also has to be praised here. I mean, Esteban Arango's direction is just so impressive. The way he's able to blend all these different genres. Like I said, one second this movie is this crazy crime thriller where you are just on the edge of your seat, not knowing what's going to happen as things are escalating, as people start to become more aware of what's gone on that's made this group come after Ponyboy. It becomes so gripping in that way, but yet it also feels so intimate and sort of quiet in the way it's studying this character and getting you to understand what Ponyboy is going through, and what is their real plight overall, and them kind of trying to fully deal with that. I think it's just so well done in this movie. This is one of those films where could absolutely crumble if you don't have the director, but I mean, Arango just does such a great job of making it feel focused throughout. It never feels like one tone is compromising the other. If anything, it elevates the film. The movie also is very funny. There's a lot of moments that had me laughing here, and in ways you wouldn't expect it to be. The laughs come at the most unexpected of moments, but that's when a comedy really works, and this film very much does work in that way. The cinematography also is fantastic here. There's this great sort of neon feel to it. The score I really enjoyed as well here. Like I said, I mean, this is not a movie that is anything like I was expecting it to be. There's so many wild directions it ends up taking, and yet it's also so moving and grounded, and that's what really impressed me about this film. The ending in particular is so emotional, and it ends on just literally the perfect note, and I thought they did such a strong job of that. It's kind of the ending that's gonna really move people to tears in a way that you're not expecting it to. So yeah, I was really impressed by this one. It's very heartwarming. It really ends up being something that was unexpected. I don't think everything quite works. There's a subplot involving this one character played by Murray Bartlett, who I really did like, but I don't really understand some of what was going on there. I don't really know if that character quite worked as well as they were hoping. There's some questions I have about that character and what was really going on there, if what was going on was real, if it wasn't. There's some confusion there, and I think that some of the more ambitious aspects of the film don't entirely land, but I really just appreciate the wild directions this end up taking, but yet also having this really intimate and emotionally investing story to ground it in reality. The movie just did such a great job of that. Again, River Gallo's screenplay really just elevates it here. You really just feel that this is the kind of story they've been wanting to tell all their life, and it's just really great to see them finally do it here. So yeah, overall, I mean, I just really love this one a lot. I think it's a movie that a lot of people are going to be very surprised by. It's definitely not anything what I expect it to be, but it is a very effective film overall. River Gallo, like I said, just gives such a incredible performance. Dylan O'Brien also is great here. There's so many different things it's trying to do, and most of them it honestly does end up doing pretty well. So I was very affected by this one. I think this is easily one of the highlights of the festival. So A- for Ponyboy. It's a movie I'd love to talk more about, but it's another one where I think you need to go into knowing as little as possible, and I think you'll really be impressed by the directions, but also surprised by the directions it takes and how many of it does, and how much of it ends up doing very well. All right, so with that, that is it. Those are all the movies I watched at Sundance 2024. Like I said, it was really great getting to watch as many as I did. Every year, it's always such a privilege to get to watch these movies. It's something that I feel like I've kind of taken for granted in the past couple of years, because now I'm more like, I'm kind of used to it now, where it's like, back in 2021, it was such a novelty of sorts, but now it's like, okay, this is something that I can do every single year. And I just hope moving forward that they're able to continue to do, because I love getting to watch these films and not know what I'm getting into, but hoping that it is going to be something special. And every single one of these movies, even Love Me, which I wasn't a fan of, is something special, is something different, is unlike anything you've seen. And that's what's so great about independent cinema. And I just hope that Sundance is able to continue doing so here. This was another really strong year overall. Definitely recommend checking out all these films when they do come out, even the ones that I wasn't as fond of. I definitely do recommend seeking them out when you can, but especially Exhibiting Forgiveness. That's the one that it's just like, you need to see those immediately. I think some of these could definitely end up being really big Oscar contenders, but we will have to see how that turns out. My favorite film of the festival, 2 years ago, or 3 years ago now, hell, Jesus, three years ago now, I thought it was going to be something really special. I thought it was going to be a big Oscar contender, and then the Oscars they just completely buried it in its release. So you never know. Either way, though, there's some great movies here, and I'm very happy I was able to talk about them. But other than that, guys, for this video, hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did go see, if you did have a chance to seek out any of these films or go to Sundance in general, whether it was online or attended in person, let me know what you guys thought. Which ones did you see, and which ones didn't I talk about that maybe should be on my radar? I know there were a lot of movies that unfortunately they didn't end up doing a online screening for, so let me know some of the ones that absolutely should be on my radar, ones that maybe I didn't talk about. I would love to hear more about that, but that's it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. We'll see you guys in my next video, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.